All right. So welcome everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you're connecting from. I'm Sagnik Datta. I will be your host today. I function here as the technical marketing lead for the workspace ecosystem at Citrix Ready, as well as I manage strategically important partner relationships such as NVIDIA's. Along with me, I have two remarkable experienced folks within IT. Konstantin, could you please introduce yourself for everyone today?
Sure. Hi, everybody. I hope everyone can hear me. Thank you very much for joining us. My name is Konstantin Svetnov, and I'm a senior solution architect at NVIDIA, focusing on our virtual GPU solution here in North America.
Thanks, Konstantin. And also, I know that we didn't announce on our emailers who is our special customer or advisor who is joining and kept the element of surprise. But oh well, not for long. We have Bihan, CTO at Hudson River CIO. Bihan, if you could please share a bit about you before we
Sure. Hello, everyone. No problem. Hello, everyone. I'm Bihan Venter. I'm managing partner at Hudson CIO. We are a managed service provider focused on healthcare. And today we're going to talk about the solution we implemented for one of our customers, Touro College.
All right, thanks for the introductions. We have a large audience here, and I look forward to read your comments, questions, and feedback. And feel free to drop in these at the chat panel available at your right-hand side of the GoToWebinar window. And just a cautionary note, we will be in the middle of the presentation, and if you're not able to start listening to it, make sure you're muting your microphone and turning the volume up. You will see the instructions on the screen as well, but just making sure you're aware in advance. Next slide, please. Konstantin, if you could move to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this webinar is brought to you by Citrix Ready, and as part of the technical webinar series, we showcase how Citrix and our partners have integrated our products to deliver valuable solutions designed to work seamlessly in your IT environments. We maintain the Citrix Ready marketplace, and that's the #1 source to help you find third-party vendor products that are validated with Citrix and thus help you make a better Citrix purchasing decision. So I highly recommend exploring citrixready.citrix.com. Next slide. I think we are familiar with what Citrix app and desktop virtualization delivers to our healthcare, but if you consider for a moment the forces of change, a reason why we are all here, you're likely to be able to sum up the challenges under one or many of these three, namely experience, choice, and security. And not just any experience, but a consistent high-definition user experience, regardless of the device location or network. That questions like where are clinicians, students, and staff logging on from? Is it a secure hospital network or a public Wi-Fi? And what devices are they joining? Like thin clients, laptops, or home devices? And what do you want to deliver them with a Windows 10 desktop or a Linux desktop, or do they just need a virtual application or a SaaS application or a mobile application for that matter? So scalability, like should we do 100 VDIs per server or 150? If you could just go back to the slide, please. And that's there. So another point is about choice, which is to say the flexibility and access management of support of any device. So like design choices around, do I go on-prem, on hybrid, or multi-cloud, or how do I deliver my rich graphic applications packs for my radiologists seamlessly, regardless where these applications is installed. And I still want to be able to save the heavy imagery data centrally for easy management and stuff around that. And last but not the least, security. And in security, I mean the more holistic sense, ensuring HIPAA compliance and providing the controlled access across the entire portfolio of application devices and data. And not only that, but also user behavior analytics around that. So like which medical student or staff is accessing what, and is that an appropriate usage for their functional role? Right. So how do we tackle all these? Next slide. There's the several more IT troubles that may or may not be unique to your industry, but can result in many sleepless nights, of course. To address that, Citrix brings you the Citrix Workspace that unifies not just our virtual app and desktop solution, but also address the wide range of healthcare IT priorities, including single identity that is important for a clinician workforce. So today we will be focusing on our webinar on delivering value-based healthcare, especially from the high-definition user experience standpoint, and how do we ensure it's being cost-effective. Well, with that thought in your mind, let me pass on the speaking rights to Konstantin from NVIDIA to take over.
Thank you, Sagnik. I appreciate it, and thank you everybody for attending today's webinar and for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us. And thanks for Citrix for hosting us, of course. As Sagnik talked to you guys about, Citrix has been incredible in solving the challenges of application and desktop virtualization over the years. And I'm going to continue to talk to you guys about virtualization. That's the common theme of our conversation today. And we're going to talk about NVIDIA and GPUs and how Citrix and NVIDIA together can help you solve your challenges in your everyday IT workflow, and how we can maximize user experience for your employees. And so, what is a GPU? GPU stands for Graphics Processing Unit, right? And I'm sure many of you guys out there, maybe some of you guys out there are gamers and have gaming workstations and PCs. You guys know that GPUs are a critical component of that gaming system, right? Because you need a accelerator to take care of the graphics and render the pixels for you, right? And do those computationally intensive tasks that the CPU may not do as efficiently as possible. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to take that concept of graphics acceleration and we're going to apply it to your virtualized environment and show you how our virtual GPU solutions work and what they consist of under the hood and how they can improve your overall application and end user experience. So whenever you're going from physical to virtual, I know a lot of you guys out there are very well painfully aware of that, you come up against a very interesting challenge. And that challenge is, how do you provide the same or better user experience in a virtual environment that your end users are used to on their physical workstations, right? In other words, you have to match that expectation that the user has, and their applications have to run like they run locally, right? And all of us that have spent their careers in IT know that end users will find ways around us, right? If they don't like the system, if the system doesn't perform up to their expectation, if it doesn't run like their local machine, they will find ways to avoid it, and ultimately your virtualization project may not be as successful as you would want it to be, right? And so if you think about today, if you're an end user and you go out there to Best Buy and you get a laptop with Windows 10 or you get a new PC with Windows 10, most likely you're going to get the latest generation of CPU with very high fast clock speeds, right? You're going to get a lot of memory, you're going to get some SSD storage, and most likely you're also going to get a GPU, and more often than not, that GPU is going to be an NVIDIA GPU to take care of that graphical user experience and the graphical aspect of your application. And so with virtualization over the years, we've been able to virtualize those desktops, right, and deliver applications as part of VMs to end users very, very successfully, right? And so if we're able to virtualize the server resources like a CPU, memory, even networking and storage, there's no reason whatsoever why we shouldn't be virtualizing the GPU, which is becoming more and more critical component of those endpoint devices that your end users like to use. And so a little bit about how our solution works. Our solution is called NVIDIA Virtual GPU, and it's also previously known as NVIDIA Grid. And I know a lot of you guys out there continue to use the term grid. I keep using it from time to time because I'm so used to it, right? But recently, we made a slight change in the naming just to reflect what the concept actually is, right? When you say NVIDIA virtual GPU, it's much more of an accurate representation of what the solution actually does. And what the solution does is it allows you, through the use of software, to virtualize a GPU sitting in a server in your data center and assign that GPU to multiple virtual machines at the same time. That's really the concept, right? So you're going to have a server, GPU, and hardware, and then you're going to have our software, virtual software, sitting on top of that. And you will be allocating virtual GPU profiles to each of your virtual machines, essentially guaranteeing that virtual machine access to what's called the frame buffer or the GPU graphics memory. And so on the screen, on the left, you see a traditional sort of CPU-only virtualized environment, right? Which is your sort of traditional Windows 7 environment, right? That's how we all got started. No GPU, CPU only. And what happens is every time an application executes a graphic call to one of the industry standard APIs like a DirectX or OpenGL, WebGL, etc., that call is then intercepted by a generic driver within the OS and sent down to the CPU for processing, right? With the GPU on the right side, with a vGPU-enabled VM, our virtual GPU software actually offloads those calls from the CPU to the GPU for rendering. And the benefit you get is twofold, right? A, you get better user experience because that's what a GPU does. But B, and equally as important, you get to generally lower your CPU consumption on a per VDI session basis because we offload those heavy graphic calls that the GPU is incredibly efficient at solving. We offload those and render them on the GPU, and we free up the CPU to do other things, or for you as an IT admin to potentially reclaim that capacity and use it to create other VMs. And so through the use of our software, we're able to deliver virtual GPU capabilities to various different user categories, right? So when we first developed NVIDIA Grid back about 6 years ago, give or take, it was really, and some of you guys remember the days of the K cards, the K1 and the K2 cards. We were really solving, mostly we were solving those very high-end use cases like 3D applications, design, engineering, things like that. But with the innovations that we've put into our software, and also with the sort of emergence of Windows 10 as an operating system and more applications becoming more and more graphic intensive and also integrating multimedia content into the application stack, we're seeing virtual GPU being rolled out as sort of a universal platform for both knowledge workers and standard users, as well as for higher end workloads like your technical professionals, like creative artists, like designers, engineers, as well as in the healthcare space for 3D use cases like medical imaging, DICOM viewing, etc. Some of these use cases that we're going to touch upon today. So we have different software editions that address those different scenarios, and we also allow mixing of those software editions in case you have both standard users as well as power users in your environment that you can accelerate at the same time. And so beyond the technical benefits of virtual GPU, if you think about the business benefits of desktop and application virtualization, you're able to achieve more mobility, right? A better security and reduce infrastructure costs, and ultimately improve the quality of care, right? If you think about an application that maybe it's struggling when you virtualize it, maybe it doesn't provide the quality of the image that a medical professional expects to see, or it's running choppy and it's not smooth, right? That's really a huge challenge that will most likely result in at least a subset of those users really rebelling against the idea of VDI, right? And so with the use of our virtual GPU software and hardware, and also in combination with Citrix workspaces and virtual apps and virtual desktops, we want to accelerate that user experience for every user, regardless of their workload. And so next I'm going to talk about Windows 10, right? For those of us who spent our careers in IT and in Windows systems engineering, we've seen the evolution of Windows, of the desktop operating system from even before XP, but XP 7, Windows 10, right? I'm not going to mention Windows 8. But the point here is that every next generation, every new generation of the Windows OS typically becomes more resource intensive and more graphics and compute intensive. However, the jump between Windows 7 to Windows 10 was significant, right? So even your typical Office applications, right, as well as video streaming, there are modules within the Windows OS that are 3D modules that use a lot of graphics. So the point here is that Windows 10 in general is so much more graphic intensive than its predecessors that now it really makes a lot more sense to use a GPU, just like you would on a physical laptop or a physical computer that you buy with the Windows 10 on it. Typically, it's going to come with a GPU. It really makes sense for you to really think about deploying virtual GPU for Windows 10 desktops, even if they're not high-end 3D workloads, right? Because of that graphic and that compute intensity, and let the CPU do other tasks that it's better at. And by the way, even between builds of Windows 10, because I think Windows 10 is going to be out there and sort of the de facto industry standard for VDI for a while, even between different builds, we are seeing increase in both, in both graphics consumption as well as compute footprint, just because of new features that Microsoft continues to build and innovate into their operating system. So keep those things in mind that, one Windows 10 last year isn't the same as Windows 10 this year, and that really has sort of worked in our advantage in the sense that we've been able to accelerate that, and for our customers to see better and better and more significant improvement in performance from using a GPU. And so we actually partnered with Lakeside SysTrack, which is a monitoring solution that I know a lot of you guys out there are aware of and are maybe using in their environment today. And we did analysis on data, on performance data, and even for the productivity applications that every Windows machine comes with, right? We see increase in graphics consumption, right? And some less, others more, right? For instance, if you look at Excel, if you think about scrolling through a very long Excel spreadsheet with maybe thousands and thousands of rows and columns, right? Or if you think about PowerPoint, right? I mean, everybody uses PowerPoint, whether it's for presentation, whether it's for training consumption. And if you look at the very right, you have Skype for Business, right? Or really any video collaboration software. But specifically what we've observed with Skype for Business, which is a very, very dominant, video collaboration software in many enterprise customers today, we saw significant upwards of 400% more graphic intensive in Windows 10. Obviously, some of that is the video module, of course, but it's important for you to have a solution for your end user that can provide that smooth user experience, so that when they're collaborating through that software, that it's acceptable, and not only acceptable, but that they enjoy talking to each other and communicating for work purposes. And so we actually test a lot of these applications. We actually conduct internal testing with our performance engineering team, and even on a traditional sort of Windows 10, virtual PC, right? Nothing too fancy, nothing too heavy or 3D type environment. We still see with our virtual GPU implemented, we see upwards of 3x improved end user latency, more consistency, actually higher number of remoted frames, right, per second, and also better, in many cases, better density, right? Because you're able to offload those graphic calls from the CPU and free up more CPU for other usage. So all of those benefits we've actually tested, and we're seeing over and over again consistent improvement when using virtual GPUs. And so let's talk about healthcare, right? Because that's what many of you guys have healthcare background or managing large, healthcare environments. There's obviously several different use cases that probably come to mind when it comes to using GPU or high-end graphical type workloads, such as medical imaging, right? I mean, if you have a radiology department that has PACS workstations or is remoting into PACS workstations, or you have a data science department that's doing some kind of a machine learning or data science or analytics type work. They're working with large and complex models. They're also working with large data sets. So you want to make sure that you give them the best performance possible, because if you think about a medical image or working with a DICOM viewer, for instance, if manipulating the image results in a choppy performance, so there's not enough depth or pixel or image fidelity, right, then that is a big problem for those folks. So they're not going to tolerate anything less than near perfect user experience, right, when it comes to working with those types of images and that data. But also even beyond that, right, you have doctors, sort of physicians, nurses, and staff who you maybe use productivity applications. Maybe they have a Windows 10 image that delivers their EMR anytime, anywhere from any device, right? Well, they have to be able to also have that smoothness and that user experience that allows them to, frequently and quickly execute tasks without waiting for too long for something to load, right? And so even for those use cases, we have a solution that we can deploy. And really those solutions are combinations of hardware and software, right? So if you remember in the beginning of the session, I talked about having a GPU in your server and then having the virtual GPU software deployed on top of that on your hypervisor and in your VMs. Well, it's a combination depending on the use case, right? So for the higher end use case, we will maybe recommend a Quadro virtual data center workstation on a higher performance GPU like the T4 or the P40 or the V100. But for the more general purpose VDI use cases, like an EMR desktop, for example, or like a productivity desktop or standard user, we may go with virtual PC and something like the M10, right, which allows for higher density. So you have flexibility to choose between GPUs based on performance and density, and also between software editions based on the resource intensity of your applications. And so I wanted to talk about the Tesla T4. Obviously, we have lots of different generations of architectures and GPUs in the Tesla product line. And when you say Tesla, that means that's our data center solution, right? So on the consumer side, you have GeForce. On the data center, on the enterprise side, you have Tesla, right? And so with Tesla, we have four generations of architecture that are supported in a virtualized environment, right? And we have several offerings from every architecture. But our latest release, our latest product offering is called the Tesla T4. And T stands for Turing, which is also our latest architecture. And the very interesting thing about the T4 solution is that it almost combines the best of both worlds, right? In the past, we've had to always sort of size either for density or for high performance. Well, now with the T4, we call it a universal GPU. It's a universal GPU because, first of all, it's only a single slot hash-length PCIe, right? Very low power envelope at 70 watts. And some servers out there allow you to put up to 5 or even 6 T4s in a single 2U server, right? They're small cards, but they're also very, very powerful. So you get a lot of frame buffer, right, when you stack up multiple cards. So that increases your density, but you also get many cores and a lot of CUDA cores, so that increases your performance. So you're kind of almost getting the best of both worlds with the Tesla T4. So we're very, very excited about it. If you guys have any questions specifically, I'm not going to go through the spec sheet or the data sheet with all the specs because that's boring. But if you guys have any questions about the T4, since it's such a new offering, please shoot them in the chat or contact us after the call. And so just to sort of follow up and wrap up on the T4, T4 we've actually tested with different kinds of workloads in different industries, but specifically in the healthcare space, we've tested how T4 performs relative to its predecessors like the P4 and the M60, right? We've actually seen with a typical on a typical desktop deployment, right? And you see the actual specification of the configurations are in the footnote underneath. But we did a spec view perf, which is a sort of a typical benchmark that we use to measure graphics performance. The T4 consistently outperforms both the M60 and the P4, and as you can see in the healthcare in a healthcare environment, it actually outperforms them by quite a lot. So definitely very excited about the T4 in healthcare. And so before I pass the ball to Bian from Hudson River CIO Advisors, I'm going to go ahead and actually play a video for you guys about what Bian's going to talk about, which is their deployment for one of our mutual customers, Touro Dental College. So I'm going to play the video now, and then Bian and myself are going to have a quick chit chat about it. And please turn up your volume on your computer if you haven't, because that's where you're going to hear the sound from.
We are the first dental school in the New York area that has opened in about 50 years. We envision a digital dental environment where students incorporate all the latest digital dental technologies into their everyday use of instruments, procedures, and patient treatment.
Hudson River CIO Advisors is a managed service provider, in this case for the Touro College of Dental Medicine. We manage all of their IT infrastructure, including the provisioning of their systems and the day-to-day operation of their systems.
I think the Citrix environment has been extremely easy for students to learn and adapt, as it is basically transparent to them. Essentially what they do is they tap in with a card and their environment shows up and it acts like any other PC. So the real benefit is that in the background, all the updates, all the patching, all the maintenance is done on a substantially easier level, which makes it cheaper for us, but at the same time gives us increased security and increased control over what's going on in our network. So for the students, it works great. For us, it works great as well.
The technology we've implemented allows a student or a doctor to tap in and access their desktop from anywhere in the building. The desktop will follow them around as they move from one station to the next. The Citrix ADC also allows faculty and students to access the environment remotely from home. They can actually log in and start up the desktop that they were working on in the school or in the clinic. That means that their 3D applications are now available to them from home.
We are able to manage our operation in a way so that each user gets their own tailored experience. As a new dental school, we are scaling up by 113 students every year. With the Citrix technology, this has not been a big deal. Had we been using PCs, this would have been a massive deal.
We've also created a flexible environment for us so that we can centrally manage the environment and scale it out as the school grows and as the clinic grows. I think one of the key things is the ability to layer applications using Citrix app layering. The environment really allows us to safely test an application to all users or to a segment of users and then roll it back if needed or proceed forward.
I think that with all dental schools, there has to be a partnership with IT, and that has become more apparent to most schools. Some schools have done it in-house, but our partnership with Hudson River CIO has allowed us to create an IT infrastructure that I think is second to none. By letting them concentrate on what they know best, that allows us to concentrate on what we know best, and the combination is just fantastic.
All right. Okay, Bian, can you hear me?
Sure, I can hear you. Thank you, Konstantin. Thank you for playing the video. Just to follow on then
Perfect.
from the video, yeah, Touro College partnered with Hudson CIO to build and run a HIPAA-compliant IT infrastructure for the new dental college that is focused on digital dentistry. The college has a 120-seat simulation lab and also a 120-chair dental clinic where they see patients every day. And the focus on digital dentistry required us to create virtual desktops that could support graphics-heavy 3D design software such as Dental Desktop and Dental System from a company called 3Shape. And the solution we implemented actually has no user PCs in the environment. The system consists of HP thin clients on the desktop running Linux, connecting to NVIDIA GPU-enabled Citrix virtual desktops to drive the 3D workloads. The centralized VDI environment is in a HIPAA-compliant data center, and there is really no patient data stored locally on the Linux thin clients. We also, as mentioned in the video, heavily leverage Citrix app layering to deploy applications to students and faculty on demand based on group membership. And users are able to move from one workstation to another just by tapping their proximity card. Lots of the times doctors will be in the sim lab on the 4th floor and then want to see the same work on the 3rd floor, and all they have to do is just tap their access card, and their GPU-enabled session will follow them around. This model allows us to centrally manage the desktops. We were able to reduce the support staff with this model. We basically have a support person on site for roughly 300 users every day, and another support person running the backend infrastructure. This year we're currently on Windows 7. We're looking obviously towards Windows 10 since that's coming. End of life for Windows 7 is coming, and we know, as mentioned earlier, that Windows 10 is more GPU hungry, and we actually look forward to that because all of the applications that we've developed for Windows 7, we can leverage Citrix app layering to port those over to Windows 10. But with that, back to you, Konstantin.
Thanks, Bian. Thank you so much. This is great. By the way, this is Touro Dental College is one of our mutual customers between Citrix, NVIDIA, and Hudson. So thank you very much for presenting this great success story, and of course, thank you to the customer for agreeing to do this. Bian, I have a few questions that I wanted to ask you that I think the audience may be interested in. First of all, how did you guys think about, or sort of what prompted you to think about virtualizing your workloads in the first place? And what were they running before that?
Well, remember that we built this from the ground up. So we were in a situation where there was no infrastructure to grow from. We had the fortunate case of being able to design this from the ground up. And because of that, we wanted to create an environment that we centralize all the data in the data center, that we don't have any exposure of HIPAA data sitting at the endpoints. But that also allowed us to centrally manage this infrastructure and greatly reduce our overall cost of ownership for managing the environment.
Sure, and you mentioned that the physical workstations would have been very expensive, right? So what kind of endpoints did you guys deploy this to, or are they pretty much using anything they want at this point?
Well, technically, you could run anything you want that has the Citrix application on it. However, we are currently running HP thin clients, the T620 and T630 models. It's actually a Linux-based OS. You can get them with Windows-based, but since we don't run any local workloads, we chose the Linux-based image. It boots up really quickly. The Citrix login prompt comes up. Actually, we also partner with Imprivata to provide the proximity card access. So it actually gives a really quick experience for users just to tap their card and get their full desktop. I realize that some customers out there may have a blend where they have perhaps existing Windows desktops with local applications. This certainly would support that as well.
Gotcha. Yeah, but definitely those endpoints were probably cheaper than those expensive workstations that you were referring to, right?
Yeah, they are. I think in the long run, if you look at managing distributed Windows workstations, I think that there's a hidden cost there.
Sure. So what did you guys use for? You mentioned that you used the Tesla GPU and you used the Quadro virtual data center. How
Sure.
did you? Can you walk me through sort of the selection process for the GPU that you used and for the software that you used?
Sure. Because we currently have gear from EMC, hyperconverged EMC hardware, that actually ships with the NVIDIA M10 GPU card. So there's two M10 cards in every server. Each of those have 32 gigs of video memory, and we actually are using the 1 gig profiles for every VDI. So that's really sort of the gating factor of how many VDIs we can run per server, because if you do the math, obviously you have 64 capable GPU capable VDIs then per server. You do have to watch your CPU consumption, obviously, and memory. Obviously, it's just another function of how much memory you have in the node. We currently have half a terabyte in every node, and we're assigning 6 gig of RAM per Windows 7. We are looking at potentially upping that a little bit for Windows 10, but we're a little bit of ways away from deciding, since we haven't done all the testing we'd like to on that yet.
Okay, great. And then in terms of the application stack, you mentioned some of the applications that we see on the screen.
Sure.
I'm assuming that these are mostly imaging type applications, but you also mentioned that they might be streaming videos or running Office at the same time. So are these all sort of concentrated on the same image, or are they? Do you guys have dedicated separate images for the different applications?
Yeah, when we first started, we actually had a split of users. We had just office workers on non-GPU enabled nodes. We've actually moved away from that in anticipation of Windows 10 coming. So all users right now are actually on GPU enabled nodes, regardless of what they are doing. The applications are, for students and faculty, are very heavy 3D applications that they use to design crowns, and then they actually are able to send that off to 3D printers and 3D milling machines to then create the crowns for patients. So yes, there's a heavy GPU workload for a large segment of the user population, but there's also a subset of administrative users that are benefiting from having the GPU-enabled desktops, which lines us up very well for Windows 10 going forward.
Perfect, and that's a very important point, beyond that you made that I just want to sort of repeat and almost paraphrase in terms of Windows 10. So I know a lot of you guys out there, have obviously support, as you should, with your enterprise software, whether it's Windows or Citrix or NVIDIA. But Windows 7 end of life, end of support is really coming up. It's in fact the extended end of support is my understanding that it's coming up, and so I would anticipate to see we're already seeing a lot of Windows 7 to Windows 10 migration. There was a huge uptick last year compared to previous years, but now this year has been even higher, right? Even the first couple of months, the first couple of quarters of 2019. We're seeing a huge uptick. So in Windows 7 to Windows 10 deployments, people don't want to be to be left without support, right? And it's one of those things that being proactive, I think, is important. And again, having a Citrix with a virtual GPU sort of work hand in hand together. We believe, and we see that in the field, that our virtual GPU technology enables you to have that consistent user experience.
Sure. I do see a question here about cloud, and I can touch on that maybe just quickly.
Perfect. Yeah, we can move to the Q&A for sure. So let's why don't we do that, Bia? Yeah.
Thank you.
Perfect timing.
Yeah. So the question was, could we have implemented this solution in the cloud? The answer was, when we built this 3 years ago, no, because the licensing for Windows 10 at the time did not really allow us to deploy a VDI-based as a service in the cloud. That has come a long way. I know that Microsoft has recently made some announcements on some desktops available in Azure, and I'm sure that throughout this year you will start to see more and more GPU-enabled VDIs in cloud services such as AWS and Azure. The catch is that you have to be sure that those are HIPAA compliant cloud services and that they are willing to sign a BAA agreement with you. Else there's no point in doing that.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's see. Let's take a look at some of the questions, Sagnik. So I see, oh, there's quite a few of them. Okay, so the good news is that we have time, which almost never happens. So why don't we just dive right into it and see what we can answer today.
Yeah, so like the one of the questions is a little bit more detailed. So like I'm working on one of the solutions on Citrix and app on Nutanix and AHV plus PVS and NVIDIA M10 card, and also using Unidesk for layered image for an app. And do we see any component that will not work here in the combination, and what licenses does that need? So the answer to that question is it doesn't look like to be not compatible, but it depends really on the workload that you're running. So we'll just drop in a quick note. So a note on the licenses that you need. So if you're running workloads that need certain optical imaging, advanced DICOM visualization that requires CUDA, then maybe you should buy the Quadro virtual data center workstation license. But if it is the primarily the knowledge worker workload, then the grid virtual PC, virtual apps might be applicable. I'll just send out notes there, Konstantin. So maybe you can move to the next question.
Thank you. Yeah, and let me just touch upon that real quick because I can make a comment also. I think Sagnik is exactly right. We have different software editions based on both your workloads, the resource intensity of your workloads, as well as the delivery model, right? So we support both, full VDI, meaning Windows 10 single user connection desktops. We also support session-based hosting, like virtual apps or the oral Zen app, right? Or with RDSH, we support that as well for acceleration. And yes, if for example, if your workloads are, if you're just publishing, for example, Office and web browser and things like that, then all you need is just a NVIDIA virtual apps license. By the way, we license our licensing is on a per user basis, so keep that in mind as you're speccing out your solution. But vApps is typically what we recommend for those Zen app scenarios. But if you are publishing more high-end 3D type applications that need more resources and that take advantage of a Quadro driver, then yes, we would recommend the Quadro virtual data center workstation, regardless whether it's a virtual desktop, a single user VDI, or a session-based host like a Zen app or RDSH. In terms of the hypervisor, yes, we support Nutanix Acropolis as well. So we have a support matrix on our website that you can check out. But yes, at this point, we support most of the major hypervisors out there.
Perfect. So there's another question around for Bihan, while it takes only 2 people to support the environment now, how many people did it take to build the infrastructure from beginning to end?
We have a small team. I'd say it probably took about 5 of us to design and build the infrastructure. Most of the heavy lifting was obviously getting other vendors in to get the physical infrastructure in a brand new building, all the cabling, all the network design, and the connectivity up and running. But once you have the connectivity up and running and the server hardware in place, then it's a fairly quick pace to get all the server infrastructure installed and provisioned.
Got it. And what kind of proximity cards and proximity card readers is deployed?
We are using the Imprivata proximity card reader. I don't have the model number in front of me. The model number will depend on the frequency of cards that you already have in-house. So if you want to reuse any of your existing ID cards, take a look at the frequency and match it to the reader. Or if you are issuing cards, then you have to just buy the cards that match the frequency of the reader. And again, we run the Improvada agent on the Linux thin client. So when you tap your card, it just asks you for a PIN. So you type your card, type in the PIN, and your desktop launches.
So, like, do you want to add in any more? Could this model for Toro be employed leveraging a similar cloud infrastructure like AWS and Google with NVIDIA GPUs, or rather, this person assumes that there's a hefty capital investment for on-prem design?
Yeah, I think that's the question that I covered when we kicked off, and the short answer is I think let's see how this pans out in this year when some of this will become available in Azure and AWS. But like I said, make sure that if you have HIPAA compliant data, that you are sure that your cloud partner is willing to sign a BAA agreement and that it will be hosted in a HIPAA compliant environment in the cloud. And for us, that's always been a challenge in talking to vendors and making sure that what they do is compliant. Even small things like a voicemail system, has to be HIPAA compliant.
So we can take a few more questions, but before we do that, let me just briefly speak about the NVIDIA virtual GPU resources and the different websites that we have that you guys can visit. So if you have a GPU already in your server, you can get a 90-day eval software license for the virtual GPU software, so that you can deploy, do a POC, play around with it in your environment before moving to committing to any kind of purchase on the software side. So if that's something that's of interest to you guys, please check out our virtual GPU trial website. And also we have a virtual GPU test drive website. Okay, so on the test drive website, you can actually sign up for a virtual desktop, a vGPU powered virtual desktop in the cloud that has a bunch of applications that are pre-installed on it that you can play around with and sort of get your hands on it without having any kind of infrastructure, right? And you can also run web browsers. I mean, you can pretty much run videos, anything you want in that VM, and just to sort of get an idea about the performance, right? So that might be the easiest way to get started. And then, like I said before, if you have a GPU or if you get a GPU for your server, then you can sign up for a 90-day eval license, which contains all of the drivers and all the features and functionalities of every software edition out there. This slide also has links for the YouTube video that we just played. If you guys want to sort of get yourself more familiar with the use case that Bian was talking about, and that environment that he helped design and implement. And of course, we have our forums, right? So our forums is actually something that we monitor on a regular basis because we get a lot of interesting questions and even some of the new features that we continue to build into the product. A lot of the ideas actually do come from the forum. So definitely recommend you guys check them out and subscribe to our Twitter handle as well.
Just to add to that, if anybody has any questions, feel free to reach out to me if I can be of any help on scaling on the architecture side as well.
Great. So there's one more question. We have VDI environments running Epic. Will GPUs also benefit for such a use case?
Yeah,
well, Epic is. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Deanna. I'll talk about it after.
Well, it really depends. I think Epic is I don't have a ton of experience with Epic, but it's basically an EMR system. It really depends on the operating system. I think going to Windows 10, yes, you will need to look at GPUs regardless because of Windows 10. Epic itself, I'm not aware if Epic actually has GPU intense workloads in the EMR system or not.
Yeah, so I just sort of following up on what Bian said. Windows 10 environment, right? When you elevate the user experience and you provide a general, high-end graphic performance for just for any workload, right, on that virtual desktop, EMR and web-based applications are part of it, right? With EMR specifically, in the past they've been a lot more text-based, so maybe in a Windows 10, Windows 7 environment, maybe you wouldn't see that much improvement. But I can share actually a personal story. I was at the HIMSS, which is the big healthcare technology conference in Orlando a few weeks ago, and I was talking to an EMR admin, and one of the very interesting points that he made was that now he's starting to see more and more image content in some of those EMR platforms. Okay, so if a doctor logs in and, for example, they have to load some kind of image, or whether it's it's some kind of a medication, drug, or even a patient face or something like that, expanding that, manipulating that, that generates more and more graphics. So we definitely do expect to see more imagery and multimedia content even in those more traditional EMRs and text-based type applications.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think the EMR often just calls your PACS system also to display those images. So you can probably expect to have, some radiology images to be present. And there's a question here about data and bandwidth. We currently, for this customer, have a 40 gig backbone. Not sure if that helps in any way.
Yeah, and there is a question about how can I get support in Spain. I think there should be a distributor, and constantly to talk about that.
Sorry, what was the question again?
How can I get support for our virtual GPU solution technology in Spain?
Oh, in Spain? Yeah, so we have local field account teams, obviously depending on where you are with your implementation, right? If you're an existing customer that's already purchased the software, then you should have what we call SUMS, S-U-M-S, which is basically our support, updates, and maintenance contract. So all you need to do is just open up a ticket with our enterprise support team. But if you are a new customer, or if you are someone who's just exploring the solution right now, the best thing to do would be to get in touch with your local account teams over there in your territory, which I know we have presence in Spain for sure. But if you get in touch with us, maybe through Citrix Ready, or just shoot us an email, and we will definitely put you in touch with your local resources.
Perfect. And if you purchase a Tesla M10 card, does it come with any licenses at all? Like, if not, is there ever a case where someone could buy a M10 without also acquiring licenses?
The simple answer here is no, because the M10 card will come with just the hardware itself, right? But if you want to virtualize the card, and if you want to run your VMs and carve that card any way you want to, and virtualize those graphics, right? No, you have to have the license. There is no other way. It doesn't come with licensing, so you have to purchase that either through your OEM or through your NPM partner or distributor.
Yeah, every VDI actually runs a NVIDIA licensing component, and that reaches out to a license server that you have on-prem. And as you boot up that VDI, it will actually check out a license from the NVIDIA license server.
Yep, and just to add on that, this software license model enables NVIDIA to deliver on new feature requests without requiring new hardware. Like, for example, they support the ZenMotion vGPU live migration support for Citrix hypervisor. So customers can only need the new software immediately benefit from the new functionality without any hardware upgrade. So that's the value that you see in having a software license model.
Yes, anytime you're virtualizing, think of it as a function of the software, right? Now, we do have Tesla offerings and architectures out there for that are widely adopted in the high performance computing and machine learning and deep learning space, right? Those big massive HPC clusters in universities and things like that, right? That's a completely different use case, right? But anytime you're talking virtualization, VDI, graphics, then yes, you have to have that license.
So next question is like, with the 50% impact on CPU for Windows 10, what hardware CPUs are we looking at for the refresh? So like, how does the workload look like from an app perspective? What apps are running simultaneously in the VDI? Because that might impact even more.
Trying to understand the question. I think you should baseline it and see what your users use every day. Obviously, we know our users use predominantly 3D applications, so we have to baseline and test for that. But I think every case is going to be slightly different based on what your user's work profile looks like every day. As a reference, the CPUs we have are, I think, 2.2 gigahertz CPUs. We have 2 of those in each node, and each of them has 40 cores. So we basically have 80 cores per node.
Yeah, and just to add to that as well, it also depends on some applications will be actually very compute intensive, so very CPU intensive, right? Not necessarily. So you may run out of CPU before you run out of GPU, kind of thing. But Bian is exactly right about doing testing and benchmarking. It's incredibly important. So, a lot of times what we recommend is capturing your user profile or the type of workload and the profile of your application before you start testing, right? So if you have a bunch of physical workstations, for example, that maybe they even have an NVIDIA Quadro card in it, and they're running some kind of a high-end graphical application or 3D modeling system, there's tools out there like a GPU profiler. That's one that's freely available. Again, that's GPU profiler. You can find that on GitHub. That actually can capture the CPU utilization, the GPU frame buffer and GPU cycles utilization, and a lot of other important metrics that can then help you size your environment when you go virtual, right? So, for example, if you're able to determine that your average frame buffer utilization on a given physical desktop is, say, 2 gigabytes, then that is probably a good starting point, although it's not exactly comparing apples to apples, because when you add the hypervisor to the mix, it works a little bit differently. But it's definitely a great starting point to know your resource consumption on the physical side if you have those resources there.
That's very helpful. So there's another question about the packs. Like, what is your experience of deploying GPUs to use packs running XenApp and virtual applications? I think Bian and Konstantin, you can take a shot at this.
Well, we are obviously currently using a pack system for the dental school, in addition to the 3D modeling applications where they are pulling up X-rays as they see patients every day. So yeah, absolutely, it's working with that.
Yes, absolutely, and it's actually one of the primary use cases and what we call low-hanging fruit for us, right? Because the more the more graphic intensive, the more the image, you have to have image fidelity and quality and the pixels, etc. And that's so important to those users, right? Then the more improvement you're going to see generally. So.
Perfect. So in case of vApps licenses XenApp published application, how many users we should consider on one M10 card for light user workload?
Well, it really comes down to the memory allocation. If you're using the 1 gig profiles, then obviously you have 64 over 2 cards or 32 per card. And on the M10 card specifically, you cannot mix and match profiles. So if you pick a 1B profile, for example, then you have to use 1B across that card. And just to follow up on the previous question about the the PAX system. So the Citrix client actually has a lossless mode. So your image will present itself as lossless to the user.
Yeah, so that's actually a very important point because it disables the whole adaptive virtual application, and you get a complete lossless mode. So that's a recommended policy thing that we recommend for PAX. Okay, I think that's all we have. Yeah, and we are right in time. Thanks for the session. I think I learned a lot, and Bian and Constantine, appreciate you guys joining in and sharing your knowledge with us. For folks who have been asking about the slides, we will share the recording with all the attendees within a day or two to your registered email ID. With that said, we are about to end today's webinar. I want to thank each one of you who have attended our webinar today in the Citrix Ready Technical Webinar Series. And this shall conclude our broadcast.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for inviting us.
Thank you all.